Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.
Morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Yes, it's me, Basil Valentine, back with another new show, this time Countdown with me, Basil Valentine. And what I will be doing is counting down the top stories of the day, however many there may be. And I'll be playing clips from news sources and social media, and I'll be joined every day by a great guest. Today, that's going to be Bernie de Haldevang, the Direct Democracy campaigner. He'll be joining me on the half hour. But first, the number one story on the countdown today has to be Nigel Farage, who's been accused of ripping up human rights laws after unveiling plans for mass deportations, something his colleague Richard Tice is also very much in favour of. The Liberal Democrats have come out in the last hour, Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper, to condemn Farage's plans. Nigel Farage's plan crumbles under the most basic scrutiny, she said. The idea that Reform UK is going to magic up some new places to detain people and then deport them to, but they don't have a clue where those places would be, is taking the public for fools. Of course, Farage wants to follow his idol, Vladimir Putin, in ripping up the Human Rights Convention. Winston Churchill would be turning in his grave. Doing so would only make it harder for each of us as individuals to hold the government to account and to stop it trampling on our freedoms. On potential payments to the Taliban to take back Afghan migrants, which Farage has also suggested, Cooper added, Reform's Taliban tribute plan would send British taxpayers cash to fund their oppressive regime, fueling the persecution of Afghan women and children and betraying our brave armed forces who sacrificed so much fighting the Taliban. Clearly, British values mean nothing to Farage and his band of plastic patriots. Meanwhile, the UK Coast Guard has confirmed today its involvement in the rescue of a number of small boat crossings. The Green Party, Ellie Chowns, their MP, has said that Farage's inflammatory rhetoric is designed to whip up public anger, and said the proposals he outlined today are unworkable. Hardly surprising, that reaction from the Green Party. Of course, what Farage has been talking about today is illegal migration, people coming across the country in boats. But the simple fact is that the Brexit, the departure of Britain from the European Union that he championed, has actually been a disaster for those who wanted to retain, shall we say, the colour balance of Britain's communities. So on this point, as other commentators have pointed out, it is in fact legal migration that is changing the face of Britain's communities. I used to live in Bournemouth until about 10 years ago. And this, I must admit, I found this report, courtesy of Sky News, somewhat startling.
A snapshot of Britain in the 80s. Beachgoers in the seaside town of Bournemouth, a place which has always been a magnet for holidaymakers and seasonal workers. Fast forward to the final days of this summer and the change is undeniable. In the Bournemouth area between the 2011 and 2021 censuses, the non-British born population went up by 47%, and immigration everywhere has risen significantly since then. On the seafront, we find immigration is something white British people want to talk about, but not openly and not on camera.
The whole atmosphere of the place has changed, and it's strange to hear foreign languages spoken so frequently in our country.
Does that make you feel uncomfortable?
It does.
Is it the number of migrants that's coming? What is it?
Reportedly so, and visually that seems to be the case. I mean, we see what we see.
What do you see?
I don't see many, I suppose, white British people around.
Why does that trouble you?
Sorry, I can't answer that question.
The woman we're talking to asks for a minute to gather her thoughts. It's a question at the heart of Britain's tortured relationship with migration, and for some can be uncomfortable to consider.
It's like a sensitive, emotional... I remember how it was. I remember the community. I'm worrying that our society as Brits is being undermined by the people who are coming in.
For decades, Britain has wrestled with the thorny issue of migration. Who should be allowed into the country and from where? Migration to the UK has changed since Brexit, but not in the way people who voted to leave Europe might have expected. 9 years ago, I visited Bournemouth to talk to people about migration ahead of the referendum. We've come back to the Cumberland Hotel. The EU flag no longer flies. It's a hotel where a decade ago the majority of the workforce were non-British EU citizens, many from Eastern Europe. Sean Nell is the general manager and has worked at the hotel since before Brexit.
Morning. A lot of our workforce were EU nationals, and obviously Brexit, a lot of them have left. They've found other work other than hospitality. A lot of our workforce we're seeing now that we can recruit from is probably South Asia.
The staff gathered together for their own breakfast after the morning service tells the story of where most of the new recruits now are coming from. 28-year-old Shardul Thomas is from Delhi and works part-time at the Cumberland behind the bar. He did a master's in sports management and, like many others, came to the UK on a student visa. He says post-Brexit trade agreements with India opened up new opportunities for South Asians.
After Brexit, the Europeans were less, so we were able to get good jobs. It's good about people coming for good life, getting good life, upgrading their life.
When I first came to the Cumberland Hotel, Margaret Kubik from Poland was the assistant restaurant manager.
We enjoy breakfast, ladies.
9 years later, we tracked her down.
So the first roundabout, we do nice and easy. Left, first exit.
We discovered she's left the hospitality industry to work as a self-employed driving instructor.
When we met 9 years ago, we as the Polish people, we were very much accused of taking the jobs from English people, yes. And then now we are replaced by the South Asian people. Now they start at the bottom.
In Bournemouth, just like many other towns in the UK, protests have sprung up outside hotels housing asylum seekers. The hotels have almost become a focal point for wider concerns about migration. We find the subject isn't as difficult to discuss amongst a crowd of like-minded people.
We don't know who they are. We don't know who these people are. Who are they?
It makes you feel it's not England anymore.
The asylum hotel protests are generally countered by groups who are more sympathetic towards migrants.
Do you feel the fabric of your town, if you were born here, has changed significantly because of migration?
No, because it's always been a place where foreign language students visit. I think this lot down the road, they need somebody to hate. Now it's the Muslims, now it's the refugees. 10 years ago it was the Poles, the Eastern Europeans.
With more councils vowing to launch legal challenges over the government's use of asylum hotels, the immigration protest movement shows no sign of abating. And Bournemouth, like so many other places, continues to wrestle with its identity. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Bournemouth.
Just to bring us even more up to date on the subject of Bournemouth and its changing population, this clip was posted on X this morning showing scenes. So, whether one is relaxed about large numbers of people praying on the beach at Bournemouth, or you feel it's an affront to the British way of life, it's certainly very different from the Britain that I grew up in the 1960s, 70s and 80s, or even into the 90s. You wouldn't have expected to see anything like that. There are additionally several mosques in Bournemouth, so there's no reason why people couldn't have gone there to pray. Some would say it's a rather overt display of a shift, not just in demographics, but in the balance of power and the ability to show your allegiances in public. We move on to the second top story of the day. There's a theme here, things people haven't voted for. Nobody ever voted for mass migration, believe it or not. That's why it's suddenly come to the surface. It is, of course, deeply scurrilous. I mean, I saw one chap there outside the migrant hotel protest with an Israel flag wrapped round his waist. Now, he could only be doing that because of his hatred of Muslims, simple as that. Israel has got nothing to do with migration issues in the UK. So he's showing his colours there as a hater, as was pointed out by the other chap. But I mean, he was also equally naive, the more pro-migrant spokesperson, when saying that, Brighton used to have foreign language students. Of course, Bournemouth used to have foreign language students. Of course it did, it still does. But it's very, very different having gangs of teenage French and Italian teenagers turning up for a few weeks in the summer to the sort of core demographic changes that are now underway, but nobody voted for it. Well, you could say they did because they voted for Brexit. Well, of course, we have mixed feelings about that. It has been a disaster for many small businesses. And of course, Boris Johnson, as soon as it was done, opened the gates, as we saw in that news report, to a whole slew of legal migration from South Asia. But had we stayed in, well, we would just be subsumed by that monstrous corporate superstate headed by the dreaded von der Leyen creature with the equally abysmal Kaja Kallas as her foreign policy advisor. The Alternative for Germany MEP, Christina Friedland, laid into just how appalling the EU has now become and how it has ceased to in any way reflect the wishes of European people or indeed carry out its original mission statement, as we can hear now in this interview.
Well, when it started out, it was a really good idea, actually. And how did it start out? Well, it started out that the European countries decided to form a trade union, kind of, So there was called the European Economic Union. And that was pretty much it. They were just, seeing how can we support each other, and we'll get rid of tariffs and everything to kind of like liberalize, how we trade among each other. But that was it. That was the whole purpose of getting together, at least so we were told. I'm pretty convinced at this point it was the idea all along to gradually upgrade this whole monstrum, you said it correctly, into this supranational kind of government, pretty much. But that was legitimate back then, and it worked. It was a good idea. But like I said, then they started evolving from there, and they sovereign rights were relinquished. In the beginning, it was just, things that kind of made sense. Let's invest in a common kind of external border protection, that type of thing, right? But now we are at a point where the peoples of Europe are no longer sovereign. They are no longer deciding their own political fate. And if they try to do so, as we have seen in Romania just recently, they just go ahead and annul an election. And to this day, they have not brought up any substantial evidence for their claim that Colleen Ceausescu was apparently allegedly financed somehow by Russia or whatever.
Just like Trump.
Exactly. So they just claimed that was enough to just annul the election. And not only that, but bar him from running again. And he would have absolutely won the elections. So they barred him. So
they tried similar shenanigans, let's say, with Marine Le Pen.
Oh, of course.
Really.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, another far right.
So they're not even hiding anymore, right? They're not even hiding it anymore. So, but, the question really is, I'm speaking about, how democratic principles are being abolished pretty much across the board, throughout every single Western democracy. And, it's a power grab. The question, or begs the question, and especially people that are more left-leaning always ask me this, but why would the sovereign government of a country, let's say Germany, voluntarily relinquish their power to this supranational organization called EU? Well, it's very simple. The agenda they are trying to implement, all of the policies they're trying to implement, they wouldn't get away with that in a democracy. They wouldn't get away with that in terms of if the people saw, wait a minute, that government just is trying to do this, then we will no longer elect them. But what if they had a way of blaming someone else for that? And that's exactly how this play is working out here.
What policies are you speaking of specifically?
For example, the climate change policy.
The net zero policies.
Exactly. The whole transgender ideology. I mean, these are all things that they want to implement. So, but they would no longer they wouldn't get reelected if they advocated for these things. But now, having the EU institutions, it's pretty much providing them with plausible deniability. Now the elected government in Berlin can tell the Germans, well, we wouldn't have done that to you. We would not have passed this, but there's nothing we can do. It's coming from Berlin, from Brussels.
Christine, they're spelling out really how ludicrous the situation with the European Union has begun. You've got these bouffanted characters like von der Leyen, waltzing around the world as if they were global statespersons of, genuine renown and authority, carrying a mandate. Nobody's voted for, populations haven't voted for von der Leyen. She's appointed by the European Commission and then rubber stamped by the European Parliament, and is done very much along corporate voting bloc lines. She is the sort of so-called centre-right candidate. I mean, I would actually say she's a fascist, a warmonger, and of course, criminally complicit in the genocide in Gaza. Who can forget those disgraceful scenes where the flag of Israel was projected all over the European Union Commission headquarters building in Brussels, and on it goes. So, yes, Brexit, a disaster for Britain, but would staying in have been any worse? Now, speaking of things that we haven't voted for, but that nevertheless want to control our lives, we come to the number 3 story on the countdown, which is the recent elevation of BlackRock CEO Larry Fink to the position of interim head of the World Economic Forum. And that was the subject of this discussion.
Absolutely. And I want to move now to an update on the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab stepped down. We had the Nestle guy who believed that water wasn't a human right. He stepped in as the co-chair, and now he's gone. We have somebody else moving in there. The world's largest asset manager is BlackRock, and this is Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock and manages almost $12 trillion of assets in 2024. And where does he point those assets? Where does he wield his power? Well, this is just one interview with Larry Fink. Take a listen.
The faster that we could find ways to mitigating the rising temperatures, I would say the more just society could be. And so to me, it's we don't have much time. We need to be learning about these the new technologies and how to move forward. And we need to then inform our investors ultimately where we think the next opportunities are going to be too. And as Bill Bill in his book wrote about we need to employ $50 trillion to get to a green world.
$50 trillion of taxpayer money towards an absolute disastrous hoax that only makes us richer. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, Jeffrey? We just have the guy that is managing probably your home loan, your bank account, your automobile company that built your cars. I mean, BlackRock has got its fingers in everything, and now he's just the head of the WEF. What could possibly go wrong?
Anybody who hatches a scheme that has Bill Gates laughing like a Scooby-Doo villain should really alarm people at that point. Totally. So again, we're hearing this. We're hearing these words. This is rapid net zero push. There's not much time. It's up to us for a just society. You know, the trillionaire class. And he says, we're going to inform our investors. There's this really gobbledygook talk of it's just going to be touchy-feely. We're going to just suggest to them how to reshape society. Well, how is that suggested? Here's one of Larry Fink's comments. BlackRock's CEO slammed for forced behaviors. His comment in 2017, he was talking about the DEI initiatives, but he says this, quote, behaviors are going to have to change. And this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors. At BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors. That's Larry Fink. And so let's look at how they kind of shape the market. So they're talking about informing their investors. This is Andrew Bailey, again, out of Missouri. A lot of great things that are happening in Missouri. Attorney General Andrew Bailey filed suit against BlackRock, also State Street and Vanguard, for illegally manipulating the energy markets. And he said this in his press release. Over several years, the three asset managers acquired substantial stock holdings in every significant publicly held coal producer in the United States, thereby gaining the power to control the policies of the coal companies. Using their combined influence over the coal market, the investment cartel collectively announced in 2021 their commitment to weaponize their shares to pressure the coal companies to accommodate green energy goals. So basically, our cartel wants you to do this, and you do this or you go out of business because we're going to put you out of business. That's how Larry Fink is moving. So yeah, I bring up these conversations because a lot of people are looking at the Department of Energy, President Trump, and saying, well, we have a little bit of a pause here, respite. We have brakes on this massive climate push that's reshaping society. Yeah. And we have, it's not what's happening in the rest of the world. It's not what's happening with the largest asset managers in the world. This is going full speed ahead. And as a side note to that, we have Andrew Bailey. He has recently stepped down just as of days ago from the Missouri AG position. And he's going into the FBI as a co-deputy director. This is, I believe, actually great news because that's a power position now. This is somebody who sued China for $25 billion for their response to the COVID disaster. He also sued the Biden administration for their censorship regime. So this guy is a heavy hitter. Now he's kind of installed at one of the top positions of the FBI. Pretty good news, in my opinion.
Yeah, whether that is good news or not remains to be seen. But what isn't good news is Larry Fink taking over at the World Economic Forum. Our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he prefers Davos, home of the World Economic Forum, to Westminster, which is supposed to be the representative parliament of the people of Great Britain. And he demonstrates that fact on a regular basis with all his policies. One of the Davos crew's favorite things, of course, is upcoming digital ID and indeed a central bank digital currency to go with it, whereby every one of your purchases can be tracked. Now, this, unfortunately, is coming in through the back door already. I was talking to a friend last night who had been at an event where there was no cash permitted on site. Not only that, you were issued with a wristband at the gate, which is common practice, of course, for festivals and concerts and all sorts of things like that these days. And the wristband had a QR code on it, and you were invited to charge up your QR code in advance, where you didn't really have too much option, in order to make your purchases. And the size of the purchase was then deducted from the balance. Apparently, the initial invitation was to charge your QR code by either 150, 250, or 350 pounds. This was a day event, so only really food, beverages, and perhaps some item of souvenir clothing to be bought. But anyway, you were invited to charge it up to a minimum of £150, and then beep, when you bought something, it took it off your balance, and it apparently proves extremely difficult to retrieve the balance should you not spend the total sum that you had invested in the QR code. Now, this is a forerunner of the kind of central bank digital currency that they want us all to have. Everything will be QR coded, and what's more, exactly what you bought will be reported to the Central Intelligence Agency. By that, I don't necessarily mean the CIA exactly, although they may well get their hands on the data. But in this case, it meant a central computer, and they were presented, my friends were presented with a detailed breakdown of everything they'd bought over the course of the day, which didn't amount to very much, a few snacks and bits of food, but everything was there itemized down to the penny. They were unable to buy a souvenir off a trader for cash. She said that if she was seen to be accepting the cash, she would immediately be kicked out of the event, which also incidentally charged a 20% premium, their own version of value-added tax, on every sale that was made. And of course, they were able to do so because every sale is through the beep. So, you know, there was no circumventing this system with cash. That's what they've got in store for all of us down the road, unless we are extremely careful. Here is a discussion on this very subject by two members of the Together Alliance, which of course formed in the wake of the COVID farrago, and I'm pleased to say is now one of the leading campaigning organizations against digital ID.
Before they were trying to do it around COVID. Now they're saying it's going to stop illegal migration and fraud. These are all absolute bogus assertions. And the idea that you're going to kind of survey and limit and control and restrict facial recognition across the board. Yeah, just the whole thing. You know, the Bank of International Settlements, the CEO has said, we want to track every transaction. And the whole idea about having privacy and autonomy and choice, all these fundamental principles that so many of our forefathers and died for. And so in many ways now it's even more acute, right? This kind of thing. And like, it's like, so we've got a campaign together. It's obviously against digital ID, for digital ID, and for a digital bill of rights. But it's just great, you know, seeing you here and talking and everything, because we've been right in the middle of it. And even when we talk about that stuff that happened, and I'm like, it is meant, and what it did to our kids and what it did to our elderly family and friends, and everyone's got stories about it all. And obviously the harms that have impacted people, the lies, the smears, the spying. It's almost like, it's so mad, it's hard to believe it happened, even though we all went through it. And they're taking the same playbook and weaponizing it all now, like the two-tier stuff, the smearing, like they were calling people anti this and anti that. They're doing it again, right? And like this emergency crisis around the environment, and you must do this now. And you're like, it's unacceptable. And the thing is, though, that we said now we're organized, we've got the potential to push back, all of us together, and in different areas. So like where we are,
push forward, actually, because what you're doing with the Digital Bill of Rights is actually a forward-thinking way of looking at, we live in an increasingly digital world. We actually do need to set precedent about how things can be done to protect our freedoms and rights, because technology has the power to liberate, but it also has the power to control.
Exactly.
Indeed, it does. Technology has the power to control, and that seems to be one of the things this government are most interested in. Not helping people, but controlling people. We come to the number 5 story on the countdown today, and I'm afraid it's another example of Britain's awful government, one of my unwritten books. In this case, highlighting the brazen profiteering and careerism of some of those at the top of the Labour Party. In this case, Angela Rayner, promoted, of course, as the champion of the working class, this wonderful feminist from the Manchester area, genuine spokesperson for the underprivileged and the oppressed and all the rest of the garbage. But it turns out She's more interested in becoming a landlord and lining her own pockets. And I'm pleased to say that party spokesman was given a good skewering over this on LBC earlier.
Who pays the council tax on her Grace and Favour home in central London?
The accommodation Admiralty House in central London. The council tax obligations there are discharged by the Cabinet Office, Westminster Council, as has been the case. So
that is her second home?
That's her home she uses for work purposes.
So the £2,034 a year is paid by us, the taxpayers?
And has been under successive governments, Nick. There is accommodation available in London for senior government ministers.
And that will go to 4,068 by policies initially considered by the Conservatives, but brought in by this very housing secretary. That will double. So my listeners, the good folk of Greenwich and Woolwich, we're paying more because of policies that this woman has championed.
It was a policy introduced by the previous Conservative government.
Yes.
It's discretionary. It's for local authorities to adopt it if they wish. And where they do so, obviously people who own second homes have to pay it in full. The arrangements for Admiralty House, has been the case under successive governments, are that those council tax obligations are discharged by the government, by the Cabinet Office and Westminster Council, because senior government ministers obviously need access to accommodation in London to facilitate their work.
2 Jags Prescott. We now have 3 homes Rayner, don't we, Minister?
No, but I don't accept that, Nick, because I don't understand what the charge is in terms of hypocrisy. We have allowed councils to introduce a council tax premium if they want to use it to manage excessive concentrations of second homes and short-term lets in their areas. Brighton and Hove have made use of that, and the Deputy Prime Minister will pay it in full. But what we're not saying is that no one can own a second home across the country. And I think, hopefully, you'd agree with that, and I think most of your fair-minded viewers would agree with it too.
I think something like 40% of Labour MPs are landlords. I mean, who can forget the whole expenses scandal of 10 or 15 years ago now? And I think the current crop of MPs are, if anything, worse in terms of lining their own pockets. I'm still hoping to be joined by Bernie de Haldevang for a conversation in the second half of this programme. But in the meantime, we come to the number 6 story on the countdown today, in no particular order, and this is the fallout from the horrendous double tap war crime, the bombing of the Nasser hospital in Gaza, of course, over the weekend, where not only did they bomb it once, but then when journalists and civil defense forces went in to help the injured, the wounded, and take out the dead, it was bombed again. Now, apparently, it has emerged that the Israelis sent a message to the hospital saying that foreign aid workers should leave immediately. I think they were given 10 minutes notice and was due to go, for, believe it or not, for some sort of training program, bizarre as that might sound. And as soon as the foreign aid workers were out, it was bombed because, of course, the Israelis were well aware of the fact that if they'd been bombing and massacring foreign nationals, then global institutions and media would be much louder in their outcry than if they are simply massacring Palestinians, as is their wont. Details of that story now in this report from CNN.
I was just listening to your reporter saying that Netanyahu says this is a tragic mishap. This is absolutely untrue. This is strategic and intentional. The foreign aid workers, the foreign doctors that are actually in the hospital were asked to leave before this airstrike. And so that is not a mishap. That is absolutely deliberate. This is not the first time Israel has struck a hospital. We have this double tap bombing that happened, and on live camera, they hit first responders trying to rescue the casualties. If that's not a war crime, I don't know what is.
Dr. Mimi, can I just ask you, I just want to pick up on what you said. Are you hearing from your contacts on the ground that foreign doctors working at Nasser Hospital were given the heads up to evacuate Nasser Hospital before a strike came?
Absolutely. They were told some arbitrary reason that they had to leave, and they weren't allowed to come back until the next day. So this is not an accident. Israel likes to say every time they strike and break a law that this was an accident. We have seen this repeatedly for the past 2 years. When they killed 15 paramedics and shot their ambulance, they said the same thing, that this was a miscalculation, that this was an accident. This is the same narrative they use every single time they commit a crime, and we just need to see through it now.
Some of us have been seeing through it for a long, long time. It's only when the so-called international community is particularly outraged that they offer one of these mealy-mouthed fake apologies. On the one hand, you've got Israeli ministers saying they intend to kill everyone in Gaza or displace them at the very least. And on the other hand, you've got Israel apologists saying, oh, no, we don't target civilians and it's all a terrible mistake when they die. Of course, a report came out last week indicating that 83% of casualties in Gaza are civilians. And of those 83%, more than half will be children. A truly, appalling, blood-curdling figure, frankly. And the sooner that Israel is expelled from the United Nations, isolated and sanctioned in the way that South Africa was, the better. Other people, of course, feel we need to go much further and that only military intervention now, according to the United Nations Charter, circumventing the Security Council, will do in order to prevent the continued Holocaust of the Palestinian people. And that is the opinion of this gentleman.
Why aren't you calling it as a genocide? Why aren't you naming it as a genocide? 7th of October, you all named it as a massacre. Up until this moment, none of you, absolutely none of you, called any of what happened in Gaza as a massacre. Today, we are encountering a massacre against journalists. You haven't named it as a massacre. This is the language that the Western media is using, and that is complicit. And that's complicit in this genocide. You guys have called the Rwanda genocide as a genocide 4 years before the court decision came out. In spite of the fact that there's far more overwhelming evidence that there's a genocide in Gaza, Western media still hasn't called it as a genocide. This is complicit, and this is allowing Israel to carry on with its genocide.
Indeed, it is. It's allowing Israel to carry on with its genocide. There really should be no debate about the fact that it's genocide. I mean, first of all, you can work it out with your own two eyes, particularly if you go to Instagram and some of the other social media outlets where you can see what's actually happening on the ground in Gaza. If it looks like genocide, smells like genocide, it is genocide. Some estimates as many as 850,000. Yes, 850,000 Palestinians could have been killed. That's the size of Manchester and Liverpool combined, believe it or not. So unfortunately, Bernie isn't able to join us today. He's had connections problems. Nevertheless, I do hope you've enjoyed this new format. I have, I must admit, and I'm presenting you in this way with a news edit, the things that I think are worth looking at, and then we'll have a lively discussion with a guest. No guest today, unfortunately, but tomorrow, all being well, I will be joined by the redoubtable Jackie Devoy, the maker of the films about COVID and how people have been murdered by the medical profession in their beds in hospices and hospitals during that particular farrago. But I'm Basil Valentine. Either way, with or without Jackie, I will be back at the same time tomorrow live. This show is live at 1 o'clock London time, which of course is 8 a.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in Paris, and 3 o'clock in Moscow. And I'll see you all again tomorrow. Goodbye for now. Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.